we're just touching the tip of the iceberg about what the potential could be on blending foods and beverages together in ways that are augmented with protein. I think we're really on the cusp of that. And I could point to a couple of products like sparkling protein water that comes in jewel colors in very cheesy bottles. But if that finds an audience and gets traction as something that's refreshing, it still offers the benefits of protein. It's like we could be in for a whole other future pivot instead of just what we've seen historically of the creamy, sweet, desserty flavors into areas that we just haven't explored yet.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Dig In podcast. This is Jess Gaedeke, and I am joined by a longtime friend, and maybe we won't say how many years it's been, Brian, that we know each other, but I am so stoked to have you here. So I'm joined today by Brian Lechner, Senior Director, Category Leadership at Premier Nutrition. Brian, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Jess, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's nice to see you.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw out an impromptu question. You have not seen this one coming, so we'll see what you got to give me here. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Okay, go-to karaoke song is probably George Strait's All My Exes Live in Texas, although my wife may not say that that's my best foot forward. So
I love that one. I love a good country karaoke song too. Well, so tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your current role.
Sure. So I have been in consumer packaged goods for quite a while. Out of undergrad, I had run a restaurant and quickly discovered that that was just not a life that was going to be for me. So I went back to grad school with the intention of getting into consumer packaged goods. Have worked on the vendor side, selling data and market research. I've been a brand manager, carried the bag as a sales guy, and then have done that for a number of different companies in different parts of consumer goods. So Clorox, Central Garden & Pet, worked for Nielsen on and off for a couple of years, hung up my own shingle as my own market research firm. And that's how I landed at Premier. And for a couple of years, ran their consumer insights function after being a vendor to them. And then that afforded an opportunity to pivot to an emerging category leadership, category management team. We're really trying to ramp up our efforts here. So it's been a little bit of a whirlwind, but it feels like the skills I've built on knowing consumer insights and how to be dangerous enough with sales and retailers and bringing stories together, that it's culminated well in the position I have now. And we've got a lot of traction, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about that because obviously we worked together during the Nielsen days. I was just thinking about that combination of those different parts of your experience sets you up so well for category leadership. I think that's a really cool skill set.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Well, let's dig in because we're going to talk about that category expertise in a really deep way. So our listeners crave inspiration from other leaders. And I think one of the best ways to inspire is to share a story. And as you and I were chatting, we were talking about just the protein space. And I think we had a 20-minute conversation just about how wacky it is and how fast it's changing. So I'd love for you to talk about it. Like, take us back to the beginning before protein really became a big thing. What were some of the reasons it did become such a big deal and explode? What sparked it to start?
Sure. So I think I have this history, correct me, and folks will tell me if I don't along the way, I'm sure. But somewhere out of the 60s and 70s, there was a medical invention around protein being used in hospitals for people who couldn't eat food or were in serious need of specific targeted nutrition. Those products made their way eventually into drugstores and grocery stores where they served a more medicinal need or for like adult nutrition. Sometime along the early 2000s, there was a realization, both I think among retailers and among the general public, who had been going through a lot in terms of nutrition over that time. We'd had a new food pyramid. We'd had a lot of fads kind of come and go, or trends in dieting come and go, where everything was diet for a long time or sugar free. Then everything was 100 calories for a while. And people are trying to figure out a way forward. And both in the nutrition community and among consumers, there was a growing sense that it's just tough to navigate the food world, that carbs and sugar may not be great for you, but they're part of dealing with food in almost any context. There was an increasingly growing understanding that protein is core to being a healthy human, and that we were often not getting enough of it because of diet choices people were making. And somewhere along the way, more choices became available in accessible and, quite frankly, good tasting protein that was different from the legacy medicinal or adult oriented brands that had been before. And as those came to market in a couple of specific channels we could talk about in a second if we want, that those really started to gain traction with consumers, and it became a virtuous circle of the more assortment that was added, the faster the velocities got, the more people discovered it. And
Yeah.
now it's emerging to the category it is today, where you've got protein sort of writ large is purchased by about half of all households in the US. And if you compare that to other categories like energy drinks, which have about 80% household penetration and maybe have been at this a little longer, there's still a long runway for protein to be
Hmm.
incorporated into more households as more people discover it and more brands figure out how to make products that resonate with consumers in different ways than they have previously or in the past, or and certainly different from those legacy brands.
Yeah. And when you're talking about that data point of 50% of households, how are you defining the protein category in that context?
It's like protein shakes and powders.
God, just that those formats alone, 50%. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So, how have some brands really approached capitalizing on this opportunity? What are some
Yeah.
of the ones that have really stood out?
So this is the super interesting part of this category for me. And I'll take a step back and say most other categories that I have worked in, you start with like a consumer segmentation and a really specific target market in mind. And then you design a product that's a laser focused at that consumer. The brands that have done well in the segment of late are actually approaching the category from being kind of for anybody and everybody. Think about our company in particular. Our Premier Protein brand is, we really don't tell people how to use it. We just make it super clear what the nutritionals are, and people adapt it for their own uses. We have people who are using it to lose weight, people who are using it to augment their daily nutrition. We have athletes who use Premier. So it's sort of flipped on its head what you would think of in a traditional
Mhm.
consumer packaged goods model, where you've made a product that's targeted toward one people, and I could cite other brands beyond ours as well, but it's like you sort of make it for everybody, and it has become for everybody. And by not putting real specific labels on it, it's made it much more amenable to broader adoption by
Mhm.
consumers. And that's just, it's wild because not many other
Yeah.
CPG categories behave that way. So it's super interesting in that way.
Yeah, definitely. So instead of starting from the consumer target, it's more do you think about format and occasion and time of day? Like maybe a little bit, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think about innovation strategy.
Yeah, so our core product, I would say, is applicable in just in a bunch of different occasions. We know that there are certain times of day where protein is used more often than others. So we have definitely started to design products in mind, either for a specific consumer set where we know there's a dissatisfier or some kind of
Mhm.
gap that we've identified, or for time of day. Like, I'll just make one up. Like, we know that very few protein shakes are consumed after dinner. Well, in part,
Mhm.
that's a chicken and egg problem because there haven't been protein shakes that have been designed for after dinner consumption.
Right.
So that market just doesn't exist. So we've taken to identifying innovation opportunities with more of a target in mind, but then, we're approaching those in a more targeted kind of way. And it's if you look across other categories that have had years to develop, like carbonated soft drinks or laundry or whatever, they have done a good job of mapping out all the demand landscape, like how this product could fit into people's lives in any way along the way, and have either purposefully or by trial and learning figured out where the better opportunities to play and win are, or what's more incremental or less incremental. So we think we have a decent handle on that and are trying to get after the bigger opportunities sooner. Some of those are more challenging than others, so it's harder to get after. But I think with a thorough understanding of the types of moments of demand under our belt, we can be a lot more purposeful about what we're bringing and why, what the flavor is for those, like what's the viscosity that people expect in a
Mhm.
liquid or a powder, like what's the size they're looking for, the flavors they're looking for. That's how we're trying to evolve and find more ways to plug in where consumers may not even have an expectation that this product could fit, but it's only because that product doesn't exist today.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting. And just all those variables you just mentioned, there's a lot of directions you could go, right? With innovation and creating those moments. What are some of the launches in the category that maybe didn't go right, that fell flat?
So there's one I'll talk about that's sort of a juxtaposition where in one sense there's been a set of products that have been very successful and another set which are essentially the same, but just the different form, have not been as successful, according to Brian. So
Yeah,
uh,
that's okay.
that's protein products that are made from plants or marketed as being made from plants. So if I think about there's two different major forms in the category. One is powders and one is liquids, like things that are ready to drink. In the powders segment, that plant protein has been a huge hit where you can go into club stores and they have a variety of plant powders available, and that's great. And in part, I think that's because people are making smoothies out of those, so they're adding a bunch of other
Mhm.
ingredients. So it's just you're putting in a bunch of other stuff. But there's a notion, and it taps into the right notion among consumers that they need more protein. Somehow, in some people's minds, plant is better than other alternatives for them for whatever
Mhm.
reason. So it really seems to fit that you can satisfy your needs with plant protein via powders. If I think about that
Mhm.
and I compare the percentage of sales of plant protein in powders to the percentage of plant protein in ready to drink shakes, ready to drink shakes are just a fraction of that. It's a lot smaller. I think that's in part because the taste expectations are a lot higher in ready to drink shakes, or
Mm.
it's that the behavior is just squarely grounded in powders. So the idea of plant for plant's sake in ready to drink just may not be quite as salient because people are looking for an elevated taste and texture expectation. So it's just a different lever. We know one of the dissatisfiers for people along the way of why they don't consume more protein shakes is that they're too artificial. So I think Plant was aimed at trying to get around that, but other
Mm.
brands have come out in the meantime that use other new emerging technologies like ultra filtered milk, which comes across to the consumer as perfectly natural and normal and is an unknown quantity that gets at that sense of wholesomeness in a better way than trying to be something that is not something else.
Yeah, it's so fascinating how that type of application can work so well in one format and not another. And so much of it is about those consumer expectations. And so staying on top of that, understanding that really deeply before you approach, your launch strategy. So important. So that's a fascinating example of the, plant sort of playing out differently in those two formats. And it's just making me think about how this has got to be a lot for retailers across these different channels to keep track of. And that's obviously your day to day is talking to the retailers. How are they keeping up with this explosion in the space?
It's a really mixed bag, quite honestly, and that's maybe not unexpected. So when I say that there's been a couple of different ways retailers have approached this. Certainly legacy, there was like a specialty vitamin channel for whom these types of products have
Mhm.
always been a focus. Some of which were more for like natural consumers, some of which were more sports consumers, but there was always the center of gravity in that specialty channel. As e-com has emerged, e-com has been a very popular place for these types of products because you can get a super long tail of assortment, big brand availability, lots of education. And those are all things that are salient to consumers in this space because they're learning and brands can communicate there really well. In the food, drug, mass space, it's much more mixed. You have honestly some food retailers who have not put a ton of time and effort into this category for various reasons. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and believe that they have been made strategic in making choices about why they do or don't want to continue to evolve in this category. Others certainly
Oh,
have.
come on.
Like I
Let's
can
judge them for a minute, Brian. Let's do some
bring
judging.
I'll do it
Yeah,
on the
that's not
positive
good for you.
side then. No, I'll do it on the positive side. And then there are a couple of progressive regional grocery customers who have really gotten after this category and adjacent ones in a big way, where they have quite literally made a store within a store putting together
Yeah.
protein, probiotics, other supplement categories, and put signage around it, have lit shelves like you'd see in the cosmetics aisle. And these retailers we
Hmm.
know are driving outsized conversion and loyalty in this category in a big way. So, and then you've got other mass merchandise retailers and club stores are just totally getting after this category. So it's getting more competitive. And we see those retailers who are following the if you build it, they will come sort of philosophy of carving out more space for this and signaling to that their consumers that they understand them and their shoppers that they're on their side. Like we see outsized performance from retailers that are getting it after it in that way. So that's our hope for others as well, is there's still so much opportunity to be had for every retail class of trade here that the more you can start working toward getting after it, even if you're behind, we think people will be rewarded for doing so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that kind of leads me into the next thing on my mind, which is like, what's the cap here? Is there a cap? You started the protein story talking about the energy drink category, and I'm just
Mhm.
thinking about how that's changed in the past 20 years. Will protein stop, or is it like it can't stop, won't stop kind of a?
Yeah, there probably is some ceiling where it's not going to stop because there's some percentage of people who just say, I don't need extra protein, or I get all the protein I need from food. So at some level, that's probably true of any category. Like, even if I think about it, it's always the joke we had at Nielsen when you're sharing household panel information, like toothpaste has 99% household
Right.
penetration. Like, who's the 1%? Yeah, I think it's a lot closer or even higher than you can see with energy drinks. This could be a mainline category that reaches ubiquity status among American consumers within the next 10 years. I think we've got still a lot of runway for the next 5. So I'd be curious to see after that, like what the next 5 to 10 gets you. But just
Yeah.
given that there's just so much appetite for getting diet and nutrition right, and food can sometimes be tricky, that I think products and brands that do a good job of figuring out how to fit into Americans' busy lives and navigating our food and nutritional scene have a lot of potential.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to know from you as we kind of wrap up this part one on protein. What's your hot take on the next protein space? Like what's the next category that's going to see this type of growth, you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna fudge a little bit and just say I think it's protein, but I think it's like, if I look at what I saw at Expo West this year and last year, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg about what the potential could be on blending foods and beverages together in
Mhm.
ways that are augmented with protein. And I think we're really on the cusp of that. And I could point to a couple of products like sparkling protein water that comes in jewel colors in very shishi bottles. That is not how the category has come from to date, but if that finds an audience and gets traction as something that's refreshing, it still offers the benefits of protein. It's like we could be in for a whole other future pivot instead of just what we've seen historically of the creamy sweet, desserty flavors into areas
Mhm.
that we just haven't explored yet. So the protein could still be the next protein if you think about it that way in some
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. God, that's fascinating. I'd love to be part of a brainstorm sesh talking about what those flavors and those formats might be. So I'll find my
All
way into one of our own studies someday here.
right.
Let's pivot to another topic that you have a lot of really rich perspective on, and that is the role of GLP-1s and the influence
Mhm.
on nutrition.
Yeah,
So let's just open it up. And so that our listeners know, Brian and I are both actually users of GLP-1s. And so we both have personal
absolutely.
experiences that might tie
Yeah.
into some of that perspective. So I love your perspective, both from a professional standpoint, Brian, but also, your experience personally.
Sure. So my personal interest came from studying GLP-1s as they emerged. We at Premier, we wanted to make sure we understood, just given the potential impact and the coverage that these drugs were getting in their early emerging stages, where there were a lot of different projections and predictions coming from health analysts and financial analysts about the potential impact across the CPG world, much less even what they were doing for the drug companies. And the more I learned about them, like, for people who can't tell on, because I'm sitting down and on camera, like, I've never been shy about food, and I'm a big guy. And at some point, after having a couple of kids and focusing on a career, like, I just wasn't feeling myself anymore. But having learned so much about what GLP-1s were doing and hearing directly from practitioners we were speaking to and talking with my doctor, it seemed like it could be a good path for me. And by golly, it's working. So I've dropped 40 pounds in about a year. I
Mhm.
feel like I have about 15 more to go. And it's been super interesting. And I think the thing that really hit home for me is we heard some respondents that we were talking to saying that once they started, kind of like the food noise just sort of went away. And I had a very similar experience to that. I was fortunate in being one of those people that didn't have a ton of side effects that I needed to mitigate. So it seemed like a super easy thing to do. I don't have a plan quite yet for what happens to go off. So that's what I need to figure out. But it's been really interesting along the way to firsthand experience the success of these. And then, kind of like with everybody, a lot of other people, I'm going to be learning what it's like to either manage post being on these or being on them long run and how that affects other things. But it's
Yeah.
like I'm encouraged by a lot of the science that's out there that says they're good for all kinds of things. And if that proves true, then, that's long term use is something that I'd certainly entertain. I'll pause there for a second because then you get a whole other, like, maybe we can find a better delivery system. Maybe we can not have healthcare cover it in some way, like they cover other medications and stuff. But that's still to be determined. But yeah, that's my take on GLP-1s. It's been a wild ride. It felt like it's made me a new me, and I'm thrilled about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's so good to hear and see. I can just see it in the way that you're even sharing that information. You could just tell that you feel so good about it. And I have a similar experience. And I do think that food
Mm,
noise, I hadn't heard that term, but that is exactly the way I would describe it. It's just not in the back of your head constantly saying, what am I going to eat next? And what am I going to, it goes
yeah,
away. And I
totally.
found it's drastically changed my behavior in certain occasions, like when I travel. I used to always be thinking about, oh, okay, so when I land in that place, when am I going to find my next meal? Or oh, do I have a snack along for the plane ride or whatever it is? And when that food noise has just gone away, it's so interesting just how automatically my calorie intake will just change. But it also means that I have to be really thoughtful about the calories that I am consuming and trying to select more protein rich options and trying to make sure there's a balance across my diet. That's the part I'm still figuring out, honestly. And
Yeah,
I wouldn't say that brands that are targeting me like are resonating quite yet. Like I don't want to be thought of as, oh, I'm a GLP-1 user, so go eat
agreed.
this yogurt. I'd
Yeah,
rather get the education of how like more protein rich foods or nutritionally, diverse foods can make their way into my diet. So it's changing how I think about brands as well. Are you finding that?
totally, absolutely. It's changing how I think about food more broadly too. And then I'll get to your comment about brand a second ago, which is on food. I was fortunate to, and I wanted to get coaching on how to think about food as a part of a GLP-1 prescription. So I went to a weight loss clinic, and they helped me. And I think one of something that helped me think about how I ate relative to before was that I was changing a diet. It was changing it purposefully, and there were just certain categories of foods that I came to define myself as not needing anymore. And it's not that I don't appreciate it, but I just don't like, that's not how we eat anymore. A perfect
Mhm.
example of that is there's a burger place which makes delicious hamburgers and French fries right around the corner from our house, and that was like my Friday stop. And I'd get a double cheeseburger and load it up and stuff. Now, if I'm going to go, I get a single on a lettuce bun, and that is perfectly acceptable and is way fewer calories, way fewer carbohydrates. And it's like, I've come to not miss it. And at home, if we make burgers instead of French fries, we grill green beans, which are, I can still dip in ketchup and mustard, but it hits the fiber thing as well. So in addition to like, so just I think of myself as eating differently now. On brands, yeah,
Mhm.
that's gonna be super interesting how that plays out, because you could see, I think that's what was the undoing of certain brands in the diet protein category. And I could even point to certain soda brands that don't want to be diet brands anymore, creating brands without
Yeah.
sugar, but don't say literally the word diet on them anymore. Is there's fewer people today that think about the relationship with food that way. Like, I'm on a diet. It's about making a lifestyle
Mhm.
choice.
Mhm.
So in my mind, the jury's still out on brands and the attraction of the specificity of being a GLP-1 brand or not. And I have a personal opinion on that, but that's probably for another podcast. I'll be super curious to see how those things fare. As one in five households has been or is on GLP-1s, and there's a lot of potential there still, because we know there are interested people who have not taken the leap yet because it's not in a pill form, it's not covered by insurance, but that could change. So there's a lot of potential for GLP-1 still to be available to more people, which means that there's going to
Mhm.
be even continued shifts in how people think about and respond to food and brands out in the marketplace. And it I'll be super curious to see how brands try to adapt to that future going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's something that I know our, trends and innovation, culture and market intelligence team really thinks a lot about is the impact on spaces beyond food or restaurants, those are the obvious ones. But we have clients all the time coming to us and, financial services clients, clients in the technology sector, like, wow, how is this going to impact my business? Travel and hospitality. If people are back out there, like living their best lives, like, what are we going to see there? So it's really, really cool to think about. And that's the very, like, I don't know, optimistic, aspirational, positive thing that I think we'll see as a shift in society. And I'm here for it. And you know what? The shamers are starting to like bug me. Before I was like, I don't care, I'm just your noise. But now I'm a little bit like wanting to take a stance of like, leave your hate at the door. I don't need it. That's how I
I
feel
personally,
lately.
after spending a lot of time on airplanes, I just know I fit in an airplane seat a whole lot better than I did before. How about that? So,
You're a better seatmate. Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. So, Brian, we're going to turn to the final dig. This is all about you, just as a person out there buying your burgers or grilling your green beans. So, give us the straight talk. What's the last product or service you bought on impulse?
I'm a shameless late night Instagram clothes shopper. Oh
Oh,
my
really?
goodness, yeah, buying interesting print T-shirts, trying to be fashionable online. Yeah, so a lot of stuff has started arriving at my house, and my wife is like, "Where in the heck did that come from?" But
What percent do you think has been a good choice?
it's probably been about 60%. It's
Okay.
hard to judge size online. You can get the style right, but sizing is tricky. I'm learning, so
Yeah.
yeah, I get
Well,
more room to
and
work on that.
your body's changing pretty quickly, so it's harder to keep
Yes,
track of what
yeah,
size
probably
you
for the
even
better,
are, right?
but yeah, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah. Um, what's a product or a category that you could rationalize any price point for? You just have to have it in your life.
Well, we've been making more cocktails recently, and I've gone down a bit of a rum rabbit hole. So
Ah,
I have, it's maybe not any price point, but it's starting to approach any price point because I'd say in the past 3 months, I bought, say, a Jamaican rum that's supposed to be really good in Mai Tais. That was $20. And then
oh,
I plunked down $150 on a very high end rum. And I think that's another one that my wife would say, really, we do not need $150 rum in our life. But so I'm going to
there
count
we
that as
go.
any price point, even though it's maybe not in the bazillions of dollars, but relative to other things, she's like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned your wife a couple of times. My next question is kind of, apropos then. So there are different types of brands, and I'm curious, what's a brand that you would date and a brand that you would marry? And they don't have to be the same brand, and that's okay.
Oh, okay, great. A brand that I would date then is Trader Vic's. That's the epitome of tiki
Yeah.
life and culture, all about fun, all about frivolousness and like life as with a paper umbrella. And then within that, sticking with the rum theme, I guess the brand I would marry is Plantaray rum.
Yeah.
I think they do a good job across a whole range of products. A lot of their stuff is pretty solid, and so that's the one that would be my day in day out go to
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's funny that your mind went there too, because when you and I partnered at Nielsen, we were then the beverage alcohol client
you're
base,
right.
right? So
Yeah,
we probably pay a little
another
more attention to
another
brand.
theme.
Yeah. Um, so finally, what keeps you inspired at work?
I think our category in particular right now, the potential is just so big, and it's just totally enlivening to think that I could be a part of helping bring this category to the forefront of consumer goods. There's not many people that get a chance to do that, or many categories that you work on. I've worked on plenty of other categories that are just do not have that opportunity.
Yeah.
It's like being in the Wild West and being able to chart your own course. And for somebody who's like me, who's been in this business a while, that's an incredibly invigorating place to be and super exciting. And I hope the industry make the most of this, which just has a ton of potential to be a huge benefit in lots of people's lives in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah. Well, you're in the right spot for sure. I'm so glad you took the time to share your perspective. It was really fun unpacking the protein space with you. There's so many lessons learned and a lot more action to come. So thank you for sharing your
Yeah.
perspective. It was
And
wonderful.
thank you, Jess. I really appreciate the conversation. It's been nice catching up with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you look great.
Thanks, you too.
Like what you heard? Share the inspiration or head to diginsights.com to learn more about what we do.